This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on vigilance awareness, need for comprehensive approach. The participants are Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and Neelab Srivastav, journalist.
There can be no two opinions when we talk about corruption and say that it is a menace, it is a termite that eats into a healthy system, way of governance, way of people's living, country's progress, or an individual's daily life. We are talking about the issue of vigilance, corruption, awareness about these issues at a time when the country is already observing the Vigilance Awareness Week. This is an annual affair that is hosted or conducted by the Central Vigilance Commission of the country. Various departments of the government of India are involved, included, and that is why we see a lot of news reports and photographs in the recent past of people taking pledge about it, talking about vigilance, how to ensure that corrupt practices are curbed, ensure that these things do not happen. Also, the Prime Minister very recently inaugurated a conference of the CBI that was being conducted by the Central Bureau of Investigation. Tandon Saab, we know there are multiple agencies in this country, the CBI, Income Tax, ED, various government, state government anti-corruption bureaus, the CVC at the Lokpal at the top, at the central level. The Prime Minister did talk about so many points, but when we talk about the overall structure of the corruption and vigilance of the common man and other officials or government officials about it, what exactly is the challenge that we, and also I will talk to you about the kind of measures that this government has undertaken to check the corruption and the black money that is generated out of it.
In fact, if you look at the track record of the Modi government over the last 6 years, more than 6 years, zero tolerance approach on corruption and good governance. That has been the hallmark of this government. No, we have not listened or heard any scam in the last 6 years, in spite of the best effort by opposition leaders to at least get some semblance of a scam, they have not been able to do it. So therefore, PM was very right in saying that the era of scam is we have left behind. And point that the Vigilance Awareness Campaign is very rightly said, is observed annually by the CVC, which is the main body to prevent corruption in the corridors of power. And this year's theme is Satarka Bharat, Samriddha Bharat. That is Vigilant India and Prosperous India. And this week coincides with the birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, India's first Home Minister, and we all know about how much emphasis he used to put on the property in public life. So therefore, from 27th of October to the 2nd of November, the country is observing the Vigilance Awareness Campaign. As you also very rightly said, all departments of the government undertaking, they are all observing this week, taking pledges, but the fact remains that the country and the government has to have a holistic approach, and that is exactly what the Prime Minister emphasized. And he inaugurated 3-day national conference on anti-corruption, and he said that the holistic approach has to be implemented through effective audits, systematic checks and training and capacity building. Prime Minister said, be it corruption, be it drugs, economic offenses, terrorism, money laundering, terrorist funding, they are all interconnected and they need to be tackled through a collaborative effort. So PM was very forthright when he said that the country has not heard any scam over the last 6 years. So that is a feather in the cap of this government, but still a lot needs to be done more. And I think in that direction, PM gave a lot of hints what his government has done so far, like removing and scrapping obsolete laws, making things easier for the citizens and reducing undue pressure on the government. And therefore, all these efforts, in fact, have helped people to see things simplifying at the grassroots level also.
When we talk about, there are various facets to corruption. If it is a day-to-day life, the tax evasion, everyone knows whatever a person's income is, not bringing it to the book, not disclosing it to the tax authority, holding undisclosed assets, benami assets, or the graver forms of the economic offenses of the drugs, money laundering, terror financing, bank loan fraud. A lot of emphasis of this government when it first sworn in 2014. So as you mentioned that over the years, a lot of acts which were obsolete laws were repealed, but also some new laws were enacted said, whether it is the new anti-black money law in 2015 or the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act in 2018, and so many others. What the Prime Minister also said that during that conference, that the stress should be on preventive action rather than punitive.
In that context, the Prime Minister also said that in the past decades, we have seen when a generation who have done corruption is not punished, other generations commit corruption with more power. He said due to all this, it has become a part of a political tradition in many states. So he said that the corruption and dynasty of corruption from generation to generation has made the country hollow. And therefore, he appealed to the countrymen to continue to strengthen India in the battle against corruption. And that is why they said so many obsolete laws which were in fact inducing people to go for corruption have been scrapped, and new laws have been enacted not only to check corruption at different levels, whether it is the financial sector but even at the grassroots level, the basic needs of the citizens where they have to go and bribe the person sitting in the counter. That also has been tackled, and therefore now the life of citizens is seen as really becoming easier. And in that context, he gave the example of the direct benefit scheme transfer into the bank. He said the poor are the main beneficiary of this scheme because now 100% benefit of the government scheme is going to the poor through direct benefit transfer and without any going into the wrong hands. Earlier we know, for instance, that the money which was sent from here for schemes would not reach the poor, and there were middlemen at all levels exploiting the poor. And now because of all these things, 1,70,000 crore have been saved which would have gone in the hands of the middlemen. So therefore, at every level, even in question of economic offences and all that, and in that context, the Prime Minister was very pertinent when he said that when we are talking of the holistic approach, and there are problems even in dealing with the foreign countries, when we have, and we know how difficult it has become to get the economic offenders to get back into India, and all these things. But still, government has enacted laws, and therefore many people who thought they can run away from this country are facing the music.
The government's effort by way of enacting new laws, some of those mentioned, by way of repealing something that was obsolete, which was probably an impediment in development and was leading to corruption. But the overall scheme, the Prime Minister, other ministers of the government, the government machinery as such has been, the stress of the government has been that we need to bring in the systemic changes. Different departments working in silos, the aim is same, but we are probably working in different sectors and we are not coordinating, and that is why a synchronized approach is not coming in. So that also is an effort of the government, Tandon Sahab, bring in transparency in the entire system of government functioning, more of governance and less of government.
Idea behind this conference, the 3-day conference, now would be discussing all these challenges in investigation, in foreign jurisdictions, preventing vigilance as a systematic check against corruption, systematic improvement for financial inclusion and prevention of bank fraud, effective audit as an engine of growth, latest amendments to the Prevention of Corruption Act as an impetus to fight against corruption, capacity building training, multi-agency coordination as enabler. All these issues are being discussed because there are very serious issues, especially the emerging trends in the economic offences, cybercrime, and transnational organized crime measures to control and exchange of best practices among the criminal investigation agencies. Purpose of this week, apart from each and every segment and department and branch of the government taking pledge against corruption, but this conference, it has brought policymakers and the practitioners on a common platform, and they will all act as an enabler to combat corruption through systematic improvements and preventive vigilance measures, so thereby ushering in good governance and accountable administration. Because the Prime Minister said that, as he started his speech by saying that the administrative processes have to be transparent, responsible, accountable, and answerable to the people for development. And that was the underlying message. And I think the message has gone quite loud and clear.
the common man, or maybe if I may rightly say it, the weakest or the poorest man is the maximum or the most hurt or affected by the corruption, whether it is in a government office, whether it is in the large system. But the kind of times that we are in, we are now at a stage where technology has a lot of intervention, Tandon sir, in every facet of life. Post-COVID, I was reading a recent report of the FATF, the Paris headquartered body that works on global money laundering, and it says that post-COVID era, we need to more invest on technology and be aware of corruption, different facets of corruption, because there can be chances that people may be conned, defrauded, and corruption may rise again. But the kind of gradual steps that the government has placed, there are so many schemes. Direct benefit you mentioned. Direct benefit is to ensure that something that is meant for you, money or resources, directly go into your account. And this is the kind of block by block approach where no human intervention. I will bring to your notice a very recent decision of the government where the income tax faceless scheme. So no human intervention, so no corruption. I think these are some of the measures. You to please elaborate more on that.
It is not only duty of any single individual agency. The Prime Minister also mentioned toward that. It has to be a very comprehensive and collective approach, and in that context, states also have a big role to play. Not only states, but also municipality, civic bodies, panchayats, all of them will have to gear up to fight against this corruption, and that is where the common man comes in. You also very rightly talked about the direct benefit scheme, and this is one example. That is why the Jan Dhan Yojana was launched and bank accounts were opened in crores. So otherwise the money would not have reached them. So a direct benefit scheme will help only if people have bank accounts, and that was the first emphasis which this government started. And now a common man, poor, they are all feeling that they are the real beneficiaries, and technology also, very rightly you said, has a great role to play, and that is why the Prime Minister emphasized on training, capacity building, and this cannot be done without making use of the technology which is available. And in fact, direct benefit transfer is also part of the technology. Poor didn't know how to go to the bank, so when they are opening accounts, money is coming into their account. That is also technology use. But in case of the cyber crimes and other very high level frauds in banks and even in money laundering, all these things need a very collective and comprehensive approach. Also, exchange of vital information with your friendly countries, because these days frauds and all these scams are very global in nature. There are banks in certain parts of the world, as we call them, as tax havens. So you need to exchange information with your friendly countries, and only then you can nab those people who have indulged in very high level frauds and money laundering and without paying taxes and all that. So in all, we can very safely say a very comprehensive approach is being adopted by this government and on every front, but still there has to be support from the people. Prime Minister has appealed to the people to join the government efforts in tackling this menace. So without the cooperation of the people in Chandal and all the state governments and other stakeholders, plus a very integrated and comprehensive approach, between all the agencies. We have named so many agencies which have participated in this conference, but there has to be very well-knit, comprehensive exchange of information and also alertness on the part of the vigilant agencies.
Tandon, one of the very basics when we talk, the government also has done away with the interviews in certain cases where it was not required. The creation of a national recruitment agency, can one agency doing all the recruitment, so no multi-layered problems, and then the issue of corruption while doing this. And also the kind of attestation, one of the very basic things that I remember even my school and college days, to get a document attested, you need to go to a public representative or an MP or an MLA or a gazetted first class officer. So all these things being done away, so ensuring that ease of living, ease of doing business is assured in.
All these efforts have now led for the citizens to believe that their life has become easier, because earlier people were convinced that they cannot get things done without all these. So therefore, having faith in your own citizen, you don't need officer to attest your document. So self-attestation of documents, I think, is putting a lot of faith in the citizen themselves, because people in India, unfortunately, the system was, you are guilty unless you prove yourself to be innocent. It should be everybody is innocent unless proved guilty. Now, when you attest your own documents and the system believes that, accepts that, that shows that the system is now having confidence in the individual citizen. And that is exactly where a collective responsibility. So, as the Prime Minister said, we have to fight is not single agency but collective responsibility. And collective responsibility also include individual. And there has to be synergy among all agencies, and synergy and cooperative spirit is the need of the time.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on vigilance awareness, need for comprehensive approach. The participants were Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and Neelab Srivastav, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com.